This is for using this frequency batch function for a quantitative variable that has too many values to use in a pivot table. We're going to be going through and using it to create a histogram with classes in the x value. So it's a range of values for each grouping. To do that, we're going to be using the frequency batch function under formulas, insert function. And batch functions, when you're entering a whole bunch of things all in at once, you don't hit just enter. There's a special thing for batch functions where you're holding down the shift control key and then hitting enter while you're holding those first two keys down. So control shift enter is going to be the last step. It's a very important thing that you're going to end up doing. Now the frequency function uses bins for the classes. And so just think of it as a bunch of buckets. We're going to take the frequency, we're going to take the data set, a data array, and walk it along, and you're trying to figure out which bucket you're going to be putting it in. And the bucket that you're going to be putting it in is going to be used, we're going to have the values for the highest value in that class. So there's going to be a range that you're going to be looking at. And the value that you're going to be using is the end of that data range. And then we'll be going through and looking at everything that falls into that category, and it'll tally them, how many houses are in that fall into that category. I've already done some work up in front here where I've said where the bins would start off. The first upper cutoff would be for that first class, and then I'm going to make the width of each class going to be 25,000. So in our data set, the lowest value is $58,800, I believe, for the house. And so we're going to have only a few houses that fall into that category, and we have up to stuff that's over millions of dollars. And so we're going to leave the last bin category empty. So let's first start off by setting up what our bins are going to be. With the bins, we're going to go through and simply type in plus and then use this number here. And then we're going to go and just add on the previous cell above it. So it says B857, referring to the cell just above it, plus, and then we want to go through and use this particular cell. And when I copy that command, I want the B857 first number, the number cell just above it, to be a relative cell address, so that it's going to copy and always refer to the cell just above it. But I want to have the bin width be a fixed absolute address, so I'm going to go and hit the F4 key or put $signs in front of the row and the column to fix both the rows and the columns. If you put a $sign in front of the row, then it would be the $sign 854. If you want to keep it for fixing the column, you put the $sign just in front of the column. If you want to fix both, you put a $sign in front of both of them. So hit enter. Then I'm going to take that command, copy it, and then we're going to copy it all the way down to a bunch and hit paste. And I wanted to go up to 500,000, so I guessed right as to how many cells I needed. And this last case right here is going to be, eventually I'm going to type in the word more. So it's everything over 150,000. So when we take all of these houses up here for the values, the 169,900 category is going to fall into this bin right here. It's more than 150,000, but less than 175,000, so it'll be counted in this particular cell as one of those houses. The 109,900 would fall in between these two cutoffs, and so it'll be tallied in this cell right here. So those are the bins. For the frequency, we're going to enter in the frequency function in all of these different cells all at once, that whole range. So we're going to go through, you'd think it'd be under insert, but there's no function options here. So it's under formulas actually, and insert function. So if you're not sure where things are in Excel, just play around and look and see where things are. So we're going to go through, and you can see that I've already used the frequency function a whole lot, along with the average and the quartile, standard deviation several times. And Excel will go and remember to go and pick those up. So we're going to use the frequency function. We get this dialog box, and the bin arrays are going to be all of these cells here. So we're going to tell it the data range, and we're going to include as many rows here as there are rows in the frequency function. And that's why I wanted to highlight all the way, including the extra one for more. And then the data array is going to be from this cell, C, 2 all the way up to there, and I didn't want to go and scroll all the way up, so I'm just going to enter that in manually. Hit OK. Now we're ready to enter the function. If I just hit OK, it's going to put it in this just that first cell. That's not what we want to do. So I'm going to go back and redo the whole thing, hitting C51 and make sure that's everything that we want and that whole data range. Here, instead of hitting OK, I'm going to hold down the Control-Shift key and then hit Enter. This is the part that's really different than almost everything else in Excel. So holding down Control-Shift key and then hitting Enter simultaneously, we get all of these cells put down at once. Now we type in the word more, and then let's go and justify everything, just so that they're all easy to see. So justify it, there we go. Now I've highlighted all of this. We're going to go and put in a histogram, histogram. So we're going to do the insert column chart. We're going to choose the first option, and there's our frequency batch function. Now sometimes this is going to work in Excel and sometimes it's not. There are going to be times where this will happen and Excel is going to realize that these are your X values and these are your Y values. That's not always going to be the case. Let me show you what would happen if that doesn't happen. Now the reason why this happens to work out is I typed in the word more there. So let's go and delete that and get rid of the word more. And now let's try and do the same thing and see what happens. We're going to go under Insert, do the column chart, and we end up getting this chart instead. And what it's doing is Excel's thinking that because we had a clustered histogram, a clustered column chart, it's going and thinking these are both different Y values. And this is value 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and those are the 1, 2, 3, 4s. So if this is what ends up happening for you, let me show you how to fix it to get back to what we had before. So we have here 2 different values. The values here for bins, notice that these values go up to about 500,000, and so this vertical scale is up to 500,000. All on the horizontal scale, it's only going up to 20 or 19, because there are 19 different classes that we're looking at. Now, these set of Y values are really small, and so you can see that there are little tiny nubs here that are well less than the 100,000 in that first bar. So what we're going to end up doing is right-clicking on the data. We're going to go and modify the data set. So we're going to select data. The first one are the bins, and we don't want those, so we're going to remove them. That gets us closer to what we had beforehand with the frequencies. Now, instead of having 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., we could edit and then make those our bins, or we could go under frequency. Oh, we're going to have to go and do that because normally if we had, sometimes you'll end up not having these values chosen. You'd have to go under edit, and then you'd end up having values where they would be X values and Y values, like we would have for the scatter plot per se. And the X values would end up being these column values instead. Here we're going to be going and editing out these values, and so we're just going to go and give them the data range here. And oftentimes those will work out. If I had changed that to these values instead, notice that things are not going to work out because they're going through and thinking the bins are the first category. So make sure it's the first of the numerical values that you have in the data range, because the first one's going to be was pulled off under the frequency function as the title. Now we've got this pretty much almost all set. This looks like a bar graph rather than a histogram because the gaps aren't set to 0. So we're going to go through and format the data series and set the overlap to 0, get that to 0, and then squash that down to 0 for the gap width, and there we go. There's our frequency distribution. And as I've done with all the other ones, you can edit the labels and everything, but I think you get the idea. Hope this was helpful. Good luck and take care.